I don't know. So I should be live now. Alright, good. I'm live now. So I just need to make a quick change to the way this is displayed. I need to make this a whole lot smaller. And then that should be it. Hmm. Wait, that's weird. Ah, I see. Still getting the hang of this, so sorry about that. Boom. There we go. Alright. So everything should be working now. And I'm snapped down into the corner. Let's go. Alright. So just a recap from yesterday. Um, we this is the wrong file, so let me actually set this up. Open folder. I want to get the new one. All right, cool. So yesterday we started with this index.js file, and this file got us set up. So now we can connect with the internet and do some stuff to have the server running. Now what we have to do is move over into um, we moved over into our database. We got that set up with MongoDB. So now we have that going. We downloaded all of the stuff we needed with MongoDB and Mongoose. So then next thing we did was we created our data. We created our model for the database. So now that's up and running. And then the next thing that we have to do is we have to use our project JS stuff. And that seems like I'm having some technical difficulties. There we go. And that thing is what got us here. So now we can have our project TS stuff going on. And now we have our project. So when we look at our design mockup, we know what the project data is supposed to look like, and we have all that mapped out. Now, in order to actually do anything with this stuff, we have to create routers, and that's where, if you heard of REST endpoints, that's where we go in and say, hey, if you're going to put something in the database, you got to do it this way. If you're going to put something in the database, well, if you want to remove something from the database, you have to do it this way, and so forth like that with deleting and updating stuff. So, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this routers. And these routers are what we're actually using. I'm sorry, I'm very specific about my hierarchy. Put that in the wrong space. Um, yeah, I want to get rid of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create it here. And we're going to put routers. And now these routers are what's going to map out where we're going. So for instance, this router will still be, you can still call it post.js since it's in another file. I mean, if you want to be a little bit more specific, you can say post router. Uh, is that a T? Yeah. Router.js. And then we'll do the same thing with project. So it goes to project dash router dot JS. And as before, the JS just tells the computer Visual Studio Codes in particular that we're using a JavaScript file. So we're going to be coding in JavaScript. Um, so now that we have this set up, we're going to have to do, I know initially we're going to have to pull in our previous, well, we're going to have to pull in a few things. So before we do that, we have to go into this index.js and we have to actually create the router. So what I mean is, I'll show you where we're going with this, because I don't necessarily know off the top of my head. And learning from yesterday's mistake, I'm going to open a new window. Then I'll open the project in here, and we're going to open that up. So for some reason my camera keeps jumping in and out, so bear with me. I think it's like a low battery mode or something like that that keeps going in and out. Again, if you haven't heard, I'm using my phone for my camera, so it's not the best setup as of right now. But all the other webcams were sold out, so I'm kind of just stuck doing it this way, at least for now. But if anything pops up and I'm not aware, just shoot me a message in the chat so I can fix it. So back to what I was saying here. So you see here we have this thing here. We have router dot post. So that's actually what we use, and this makes the HTTP requests that we're going to be using. So if you don't know what HTTP requests are, um, unfortunately, I don't want to dive too deep into it. But actually, you'll get to see what that actually looks like as we dive deeper into this. So just know that HTTP is just a protocol for sending data across the internet. So whether you're on Facebook and if you kind of look in the bottom left when you go into any website, you'll see that there's kind of like a HTTP thing going on, and there, I'm kind of give you an example. I'll just do with something safe. Actually, let's just do Google Images. So let's say popcorn. You see kind of there, waiting for Google.com. Um, I may be wrong with saying what that does, but you kind of see when you're doing all this, right? All this data has to come from somewhere. So behind the scenes, there's like a HTTP request going on. So with that being said, so we're gonna use this router here. So what we want to do is actually I was moving it too fast. We're gonna say okay, const express. Actually, I need express to get the router, I believe, right? That's what I was saying in my last video. I mean, yep. Okay. So here we go. Okay, so now we say const express equals require express. So now we're pulling express in, and we have access to all of the methods and functionality that comes with express. So now when we go here and we say const router equals express dot router, and I think you have to do that for the router object that's going to be on this express. I'm calling it an interface, but I know there's a better word for it. But yeah, so now we have our router. So right off the bat, you can just say first we want to do is make a post, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say router dot post, and this is what creates our user. So we say router dot post, and then we go in here and we say I think I'm missing something here. Let me just be sure, because just looking here. Okay, yeah, I think I'm moving right. So I might not be going in the order that I think I should be going in specifically, but we're moving in the right direction, right? So when we make our posts, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, what are we posting? Meaning, what are we trying to put into the database, right? So we're gonna say, all right, first we need a post object, right? We need to we have all this stuff here that defines what our post is. So now we need to go ahead and create that. So actually before anything else happens, I want to do one thing, and that is I want to have the link to an image that we can use for the time being until I set up that S3 bucket. So what I want to do is I want to say socks. Socks are safe. So then I want to go somewhere and I just want to review that sock image in I want to just open this sock up and just look at it so I can have the actual location. So let me see if I can do this. Copy image address and do that. Yes, it's okay. So you see this image here. So I'm just gonna take that, put that there, and then hopefully this works. So I'm gonna replace this root thing here that we did. So I'm gonna take this, put that there, and then actually I'll do something nice. I'll take this part right here, and what you'll see in a second is, remember how we when we do our get, it's gonna get, am I in the right place? Yep, it's gonna get root, and then root, well, should probably match that up. It's gonna do root, and it has to have some kind of location that we're gonna put in there. So what we'll have to do is pass the location in there because it already has um, the root. And if you remember from the, I think it's Mongoose, the Mongoose documentation, it tells us when you use that get, that you have to provide, that you can just provide the location here that we put here, this location thing um, in the request. So, geez, everything's flashing. I don't know what's going on. So now that we have that request set up, we can go ahead and say, all right. Sorry, I lost my page. Okay, here we go. So now let me go to the docs. I should probably have this saved somewhere. And then I'm going to go in schemas. Well, actually, schema types. And then I want to go to getters. And then the getter, remember here, right? They have that picture. And then you passed in that V. So the V comes from when you do it here. So we're going to do just that. So we're going to say, we're going to go over here and I copied that last bit of information. So we're going to say const post. So we're creating a new post object equals new post. And then we're going to take that, and now we have to put in all of the information. So we're going to say, actually, oops, got a little bit ahead of myself. So the post object is going to look so we pretty much have to create that new post object that we had before. So we say new post, and let's see, the next thing is new post. And once we have that new post, we're going to go and create the object. So I think if we hover over this, I know, I forgot to pull that in. So we say const post equals require, because now we have to say, okay, we know where the post was, and we say it's in another folder that is here in the models directory. Oh, forgot my strings. So we say we're gonna go, and you see Visual Studio Code already has this stuff in here for us, so it makes it a little easier. The two dots takes it out of your current folder. So if we're over here where you see it's red, and you see once you do dot dot, it's like, okay, you're out of this folder and you can go anywhere up in here. But if you were to do like a dot slash, that would just give you another file within the same folder, if I'm not mistaken. And we can just verify that really quick. If you do dot slash, yep, project router, see that? So that's kind of a way of moving between stuff. If you use the terminal at all, it's similar to that. So now we're going to do dot dot slash models slash post, and now we have it. And note that we don't have to use the post.js. We can just say post, and that's the name of the file. So now we have our post object, and we're creating a new post. So and in our object, we have to say, okay, we know how we defined it, so we have to go ahead and do the same thing. So let me open this up, and there's something nice that you can do here is you can split it, and you can split your screen. So now I'm going to split that to the left, and I'm going to work back over here with our router. So now we have to say title is I believe this is how you do your object stuff. So the property title is going to be let's say test, right? And then we're going to say category is going to be testing. And then we'll say that the cover image is going to be that that stuff that I copied from the website where we're looking at on Google, this for the image of the socks. So we're going to use that, and then we're going to go and we're going to say, all right, keep it going, and now we're going to say the content is going to be, this is a test. Okay, I don't know what is going on with my camera. I think there's something going on with my phone, so let me take a look at that for a second to make sure my phone isn't dropping out. And it appears to be fine, so I don't know what is causing that thing to constantly drop in and out. So my apologies for that, but I don't know what's going on. So so now we have our content. I think I forgot the comma above. So let me say that the content is going to be, this is a test, and then we say that the description, comma, description is the description says we're going to this, we, oh wait, this doesn't really matter, but I'm just being a little bit more what's the word, specific on what I'm doing here, just to kind of make it look like something that's semi-real. So we're gonna say testing 1, 2, 3, and then here the description is gonna be, this is a test message. This is a test, doesn't matter. And then we're gonna say date created is going to be a date, so we need to say new, and JavaScript has a date object in here, and we can just go ahead and use that, and we can just say new date, and that should be it. I can't remember if you have to do date dot now or anything like that, but let's see. So we say new date, JavaScript, and then here if you do date dot now, method returns number of milliseconds elapsed. Yeah, we don't need that. We want that date that we have right now. Okay, cool. Yeah, see, what is going to happen is going to do date.now when I start, and it gives you kind of time from now. We want just this date object, and we'll see a series of numbers. There's going to be a big number, and we'll see later. Date active is not required, so we're going to skip that, and then we're going to do status, and we're going to say the status is draft. So now we get to test our validators. So now that this thing is up in here, when we do our post, actually before I get into the router, let's just practice creating this this object, because the router is going to be a little bit heavier, and we just want to practice getting stuff into the database. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's see, I think it's post dot, and then post dot save. Yes. So this save actually saves it into our gee, my words are gone. This actually saves it into our database. So and I think there might be some steps I'm missing. So let me go back to Mongoose, and let's just go to connections, models, um, constructing documents, new tanks, small dot save. Yeah, so we can just save it here, which should do it. And then because we already have a connection, so when I go to npm and I say index.js, right? So that runs our server. Actually, what's going on here? Oh, I did npm. It's supposed to be node index.js. And we have our port up and running. But there's two things that we didn't do, right? We have nothing connecting to our database in this index.js, right? So in order to make that run, we have to get it in here. So that's when we say require. And actually, I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to stop this, Control C or Command C in Linux. And then I'm going to clear the terminal. And then I remember I told you guys that we installed Notemon. So Notemon does a auto reload. So when I save a document, it'll automatically just rerun and redo the server stuff. So I can do Notemon index.js. And what's going on here? Notemon, it might be a little trickier. I can't remember. So I'm going to check my old project. So I think I might have, did I install Notemon? So I did install it. So I wonder what is going on here. Test, so let's see, try it one more time. Notemon, did I spell it right? Index.js. Notemon is not recognized. Okay, I'm gonna Google this for a second because I don't have any other directory and I'm right in the proper directory. So actually let me go here. Learn as we go. Actually, I'll just do node index.js for the time being, just to save time. I know I have Notemon in here, but I just think I might have made an error somewhere. So keeping that going, and let's see. So we do post.save. In order to get that running, I'm just gonna pull in this user router and see if I can get that going. So I'm going to save this. Actually, I just need to save everything. So save everything, and then we're gonna go back into index.js, and now we're gonna require the database. And what this does is it activates our database. So otherwise, where is it? How is the database getting activated? There's nothing going on right now, but in a second, now that we have this in here, and if I go const user router, actually I'm sorry, if I go const post router equals require, and then now we're going to go to our post router. Oh, too far. So remember that dot slash this time, database slash nope, sorry, not database. We're going to go slash routers. Dot slash routers slash post router, and we have that. So that's that. And then with that being said, I'm going to save, and then I have to stop the server, and then I'm going to restart the server. And this time it's taking a little bit more time. And now we have an error. So let's see what's going on here. Mongo database names cannot contain. Oh, okay. So this is our error right here. So my database name that I created in that Robo3T. So let's open that up. It is currently WilliamEnnals.com. Let's just call it my name, William Ennals. And I have to go in here and change that as well. It popped up on another screen, so let me okay, cool. So here we go. So let me go ahead in here. I want to say we're going to edit this, and we're going to make sure these match. So take that out, and then we save it. And then when I click connect, let me pull the rest of the screen over too. Oh, it's not. Here we go. All right. So now when we're in here, you see this is what we have so far. So there's not a lot of going on in here. So we are connected to it now. And so let me go ahead and save this and then retry this. So you see automatically that as soon as I put that require stuff in here, when I said, hey, require the database, it immediately runs the database. So now the database is connected to the server. So let's try this again. We're still getting another error. I thought I took that out. Did I not save it? Try this again. Sorry, we got giggles in the background. There we go. So what actually happened is this category. Oh, I spelled it wrong. See that? So now we're seeing that we're actually connected to our database and that it's trying to put something in there, but the database is verifying to say, hey, you had this field in here called category. Well, category. And over here I have category. So when I fix this and save it, save that, and then clear it again so that way you know we have a clear terminal. And then I run it again, boom, you see that, right? We have, it's running, there's no errors. So if I go into the database, we go into collections. Actually, let me figure out where this is again. I often forget. Admin, collections. It's been a while since I've actually used this thing, so bear with me. Local connections. Shouldn't be that deep. System. Let's see where this thing is hiding. And when I say it's been a while, it's been a long while since I've actually been in here. So look at bit of a learning experience again. Actually, there should be a it should be another. The database should be showing here. So maybe I missed something. Let's see. What if I just? Oh, I never connected. Did I not connect? Yep. I think that nope. It seems like we have more than one open. So let me disconnect that one, and then try it again from scratch. Huh. So we got some funny activity going on here. Let's see, close that thing out. Ah, here we go. William Ennals. That's what we're looking for. Ah, there we go. So, now you see post, right? Before we didn't see that. We didn't even see this, right? So before it was just the system and config, and now you see that we have our database with William Ennals. And when you open it up in the collections, you see the posts. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and click on that, and look at that. We have it in here. So now it's in our database. So, and then everything is just like we have. And you see there's a new field in here that I didn't create called ID. And what this does is it creates a unique ID for the document, which is, remember, MongoDB uses documents, meaning referenced a unique identifier to reference something in this document here, where you'll have a series of stuff in your database, so you want to be able to look up something, right? So this is what it uses, and it creates it automatically unless you supply one, so we don't have to worry about that. And then you see the title is just as we have it, as we created it. We have our category in there, testing. We have our cover image in there like we said we wanted it. It's right there, boom. And then we have our content, which gives us same thing there. And then you have this is a test, right? Boom. And then we have date created, all that stuff is there. And we have a version. So if we were to update this and make changes to it, it would all show up in it would show up in this version here. Um, so that's really so now we just made a big step, right? We went to from creating our models to now we're creating our route. Well, we're getting ready to start putting stuff into the database. But when you're programming and you have code and you have people on your website, you're not always going to want to do it this way. You want it to be something that's a little bit more proactive. So when I say proactive, it's like, it's cool if I do it here, but if somebody's on the internet, they're not going to be right here in the source code. So it's like, okay, how do they do it? So what happens is that's where your router comes into place. So that's when we can say, you do const. So now we're gonna create a function that say, hey, if you go to a specific location on the internet, um, you are going to be able to see what we're doing. And before I get into doing that, I believe there's one more thing I have to do in setting everything up. So that way, when we go into the internet, nothing's going to show right now because we're not providing any visual data for you to see in the terminal. So what we have to do is we got to go and create our stuff, and that's why we use Postman. So in a second, we're going to fire up Postman, and that's this thing here. We're going to fire up Postman, and we're going to be able to connect to our database and have that thing running. So, and we'll be able to see in real time when we create data, and we'll get a response. So I got Postman up, firing up, and that's loading up. But let's go back to our code. So right now we have, well, before I do that, we need to say, not a const, we need to say router. So now we already have the router, and now you see it turned from that light, that faded out blue, to actually being highlighted, showing that you're using it. So now you say router dot post, because this is how we're going to create our user, and we're going to, our post, and we're going to say we want to just use past post, right? We can change it later, and then we're going to use JavaScript uses something called promises, and they are pretty much it's literally like a promise, right? It's like, hey, I said I'm going to do something, and it doesn't necessarily happen right away. It might happen a few seconds later, a day later, a minute later, whenever, right? And whenever it finishes, it's going to store that response, whether it was, and there's three states. Sorry about that, my mouth got pretty dry. But there are a few states. One state is pending, meaning it hasn't done anything yet. One state is I want to say approve, but that is not right. But let me see if we do promise states JavaScript, just to give you a more professional response on what this stuff is supposed to do. Come on, let me try it somewhere. So do promises JavaScript. So I'm gonna go in here and so yep, there we go. Promise hasn't completed yet, and there are a few states. It is, if it shows me, fulfilled, rejected. Well, it'll be, yeah, fulfilled, rejected, pending. Or and settled is kind of like, settle is like, it's not necessarily part of those states. It's either, it's like a, how do you say? Well, I guess it is a state. When it's settled, that's when your variable or whatever you're using to hold the response for the promise. That's what that is gonna That's when that's gonna be triggered. It's just gonna tell you that your promise was fulfilled or that it was rejected. And that's as deep as I want to go with that, because I don't really use promises. I use something called async await, and it does the same thing, but it gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to chaining. So if you want to chain a bunch of functions or methods, whatever, depending on what your what language of choice is, you'll be able to say one thing. So let's say you did something to calculate the sum of two numbers, right? And then you want to do something with that, and then you want to do something with the output of that. You can chain that. It's a little bit more difficult to do it with promises, because you don't have the flexibility to kind of just jump in and grab it, or say you want to change things around. It's a pretty tight woven stream of data when you use a promise. So I just use async await. And don't take my word for it. Go ahead and do your research, because my what's the word? I'm not the most coherent person when it comes to explaining that kind of stuff. So now we're gonna go back and we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna do that const post, and now what we're gonna do is, since we're sending this through the internet, um, we're gonna take advantage of some of the. We're gonna take advantage of the delivery system of the internet. So when you look at HTTP um, requests, um, they have a very specific makeup. So there's like a line here. There's a request line to tell you your post, get, whatever. Then you have your header that it kind of gives, it kind of carries a little bit more information, maybe about authentication or something like that. Then it has an empty line, and then it jumps into the body, which is the content. So here you see um, the request method, which is this here. It's going to say get, head, post, whatever, right? Delete. And don't necessarily use these other ones, so I'm going to skip over those. And then this information may come with it as well. So it'll be something like this for this request line. And then now these are your headers. So remember I said about authentication, it's really authorization. Maybe it's like acceptable languages, any encoding, that kind of stuff. I don't play around with a lot of this stuff, so I'm going to skip that. And this is how it'll look. So it tells you, hey, this is my request, and we're doing a get request. This is another kind of optional thing that you can put in there. It kind of tells you a little bit more about, I guess, the type of system that it's taking, or kind of the encoding or data. You got your host, where the information is coming from. Language, we're going to take English, and it's going to be American English. This is your encoding. So right here, it's going to be a zip file. And connection is going to say keep it alive. So it's like a ongoing kind of thing. And then there's this XML kind of body that's in there. So you have that blank line, and that's what that is. So that's how an HTTP request is going to look. But we don't really have to worry about how it's going to look, because we're not going through the internet protocols and digging and diving that, grabbing that stuff. We just have to know that when we make these requests, that we put the right information in there. So we're going to do new post, and we're going to do request.body. And remember, we saw the body is actually the stuff that the information that we're trying to send. So what we're going to do, we're going to say we're going to try to create a user if it doesn't already exist. So that's why we want to say we're going to wait, and we're going to say post.save. So we're going to wait for this to finish before we go to the next step. So we're going to say, okay, let's go in here. We're going to say we're going to create a post, and we'll actually create the, I'll show you how we'll actually create the post in Postman. Um, and then we're going to pull off the bot. We're going to pull the all of that. Remember that object that we created, where we did the cons post equals post, and we had all that object stuff in there. That's what this is going to this is what this represents, because we don't want to just create one user all the time and create one and it's done. We want it to be something that can be done over and over and over again, right? So in order to do that, we do it this way, so that way whenever we send that HTTP request, we can go ahead and get that post. So I'm actually just going to make my screen a little smaller, because it seems like my phone is jumping in and out, and rather than take up space on the screen showing me going in and out, I'll just make myself a lot smaller, so that way kind of minimize the effect of that. So is that okay? I guess you can drop me a message up here in this chat to let me know if that's cool or not. So then we do our save, and now that we've saved, we're going to say we want to know what happened. So we want to say if it saved, we're going to do response dot status. We want to send a status. So I don't know if you've ever been on the internet and you went to a page and you see this big old gray page and it has like a 404 number on it, like page unavailable. I think I clicked on one of those previously. Let's see if I can find one. No, I can't find one. But I'll just show you like 404 page. And that's a response. So maybe you missed something and you couldn't get to the page and the page doesn't exist, and some people, create their own and they make them look really cool. So that's how that stuff. So that's what we're dealing with now. So it's like, okay, if it creates, then we want to give it a 201 message, because that 201 message that tells us, hey, it's been created. And you can see the rest of the codes to see what they mean in this website here. Actually, you can probably just do Google search, and they tell you what all of the different messages mean. So this 201 says, hey, the post was created. So it's very specific. So that's what that does for us. So now that we know when we get it back that, hey, you were successful in creating that post. It wasn't rejected. As you saw, like in the terminal, when I tried to create a post with some invalid fields, I was getting some weird stuff down in the terminal. So now that we have that, and then we're going to say, okay, if that doesn't work, we need to catch the error message that's going to come out of that. So then we're going to say response dot status, and then we're going to send a 400 message, 400 status. And I forgot to send it here. So when we create it, we want to send that post. So let it continue going into the so we want to see it. We want to say, okay, if it went through, if it was successful, we're going to send the post. Otherwise, send me the error message that is going to happen. So this is like, it's going to get delivered to your screen, to your system. So that's how the user is going to see it, at least right now. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to stop the server, CLS, and then I'm going to go ahead and run it again. And now I have to go into here, Postman. So with Postman, I might have some old stuff here, yeah. So I had a project not too long ago that was using some this is for my weather app, and I'll go over that in another video, in another series, I guess. So I'll go in here and I'll create my new collection. This one is WilliamEnnals.com, and I'm not putting this anywhere, so I can just leave it blank. And what I want to go is I want to start going in here and start making my requests. So I'm going to here. My request is going to be create post. That's what we're trying to do. So that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to save it. By default, it's a get, but we don't have anything to get out of the database. So there's no point in using that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to post. So what we need to do is we need to tap into that. So localhost / 3000, and I think we use /post for that. So if I go back and open this up, look in the post router, and yep, /post. So when we go here, we need to send. We're going to send in some data, and actually before I do that, I need to change something in my index.js because right now what we sent was a string of data, right? Oh, what's going on here? It's the post router equals require. What's going on? What's the area? Oh, okay, that's fine. It's just said we created this thing. It's light, so it's just like, hey, you created this thing, but you never used it. So it's just trying to make sure you're being efficient with how you're using your stuff. So I want to move this stuff up because I want to keep it down in the order of how I need it. And then I'm going to put all the stuff that I'm pulling in up here, and then the stuff that I'm actually going to do other stuff with later, I want it there. So now I want to say Express is going to, I need Express to use this router. So I want to say, so before we didn't have to do anything because before we didn't have to, we just created the database. I mean, we created our post right in the file here in the router, so we didn't have to do much. We just had to link to it. It was created. It was in the database. Now we're saying, okay, now that we're using routing, we have to tell Express, which is our app, which is handling all the routing. When you go to different endpoints, for instance, here this /post, it's like, okay, once you get there, you're going to use. So we're going to say we're going to use this. What is it? Post router. So we're going to use that post router. So the post router is what helps us tap into the database now, the post database collection. So now the next thing we have to do is we have to say, so there's a type of, I want to say, so when you're using JavaScript, the way you send information through the internet is through a JavaScript object notation. So you're describing an object in a very specific notation, so that way when you so that way it can be pulled and used. So it's just how you it's pretty much just a description of an object in a fancy way. So now we're going to do app.use express.json. So what that does here is we say we're telling the app that it can use a JSON notation to extract data. So that's how it's going to deliver data. It's going to deliver data in the form of a JSON object. Well, JSON, in the form of JSON. See, only parses JSON, only looks at requests where the content type header matches the type option. So that manipulates that header that we were looking at before when we were looking at the HTTP stuff. So it's going to say here, and I think it's accept language. No, what does it say here? Content type. There we go. So it's going to match that content type. I don't see it here. Let me do content type. Yep, there we go. So that content type it should say JSON. So that's what that is doing. So we have that. I'm gonna save it. So now we can use JSON to send our data. So clear it, run it, and there's an error. App.use. So I have app defined here. What I think I missed is, let me actually look here. The requires a middleware function. So I think I just forgot. I might have missed a colon or something somewhere. App.use. Oh, wait. Let me do it in this order and see if that makes any difference. Nope. I think it wants me to handle something. So we're telling it here, post router. Do I have everything saved? Yep. So I just do a little bit of reading through, trying to figure out if I missed something, and I'm comparing it to my old code. So I pulled in Mongoose. I have my router here. So I pulled that in, and then we have our const app express const. Maybe the port is needed a little higher up, because it everything kind of goes chronologically. So whatever shows up first is going to be done first. Alright, so let me. I thought I cleared this thing. Okay, so throw new error app.use requires a middleware function. So I think it's trying to tell me that I need to have a function in here to direct the rest of my data. So let me see if I know. I never exported it to make it available. So I need to export this thing here, because I was saying, hey, you're gonna use this router thing, and I never actually connected to the router, so it never knew what I was using. Previously, I was connected to the file, not the actual router, if that makes sense, and that's why that worked. See, now we have it with no problem. So don't forget to export, because it can screw you up over here. So now when I'm in Postman and I'm in this posting, I want to go to body, and I want to say form data. No, not form data. I need to do params. 1 second. Raw. That's what we want. So I want to send raw data, and I'm going to send the data in the form of a JavaScript object notation. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm just going to make this take up half the screen, and then have this take up the other half. And I'm actually going to undo this split. So I'm just going to close all of these so I can see clearly here. So again, I have to create my JSON, and then in this case now we're writing it a little differently. Previously we did const post equals new post, and then we created the object all in here, right? And then we said title, and we used this notation, right? Now, since we're using JSON, we're going to keep this same kind of concept here, where you're defining the object in here, but the notation is going to look a little different. So we're actually going to use a string title, and this is the way we do it here. And now we say title is test. Actually, I'll do test 2. And the reason I did that is because I know that we still have this test in the table, so I want you to be able to know the difference between the two. And then we have category, and that is going to be testing as well. And then we're going to say cover image, and the cover image is going to be I guess in this case it really didn't matter what it was, but I'll keep it consistent just so you can see what's going on with that. So we're going to take that cover image that we saw with the socks. Which browser was that in? It's one of these browsers got some socks in it. I probably screwed it up, but let me go through my history and get those socks. And then we're going to pull that and get all of that data. And then I'm just going to put that in there as a string. And then we're going to say content, strings, content. I'm not sure if JavaScript, the JSON is going to throw a fit because I'm using single quotes. So that's something that I'm going to find out. This is a test using a router. So again, Express is what handles all of this router stuff. So that's what makes it so powerful, that it's tapping into the I guess if you this was your browser, it's like this is tapping into that URL box and saying, hey, let me look at what's going on here. And when you hit specific locations, I'm going to direct you to communicate with the server in a different way. So now we're going to say content description, and we'll say actually same thing as last time. Boom, it'll just say testing 1, 2, 3, and we're gonna say we're being more specific on what kind of test that is now. Then we say date, date created, and last time we created a date object, but when you look in the in here, you see how that date object is stored. So I'm not I'm just gonna copy the value there because I actually haven't I'm not sure what the JSON notation for that is supposed to be. So let's see if this works, and if not, I'll just go on the internet and figure out what the proper notation for that is supposed to be. So then I'm going to skip date active again just to be consistent. And then for the status, I'm going to do another draft. So this should be all of the information that is supposed to go in. And now we'll test it when we hit send. And boom, oh, bad request. So you see here we hit the 400 message, and that means that something in here is off. So I think it's because this here, I said it's going to be a date object, yet I put it in there as a string. So I think I might be able to get away with doing this. Let's see. No, it is still not liking it. And let me see. And you see this error message we're getting. I want to change that to JSON. And you see how, well, that doesn't really look any different. Let's see if I do it then and then hit it again. Nope, yeah, it's not changing anything. That's fine. Do I have to save it? Raw. Alright, whatever. So I'm almost certain that the error is because of this date that I have in there. And what I can do is, to be a little bit more explicit, is I can go back in here and I can now go ahead and fix that. And I can say, oh, if it throws an error, I want to know I want to know what kind of error is happening, so that way I know what's wrong. So actually, I don't have a way of formatting that in here. I'll have to do that in another location. So let's see. Let's go back to where we were. One thing at a time here. I think a date is just a series of digits, right? So if I do something like that, that might work. Nope, still not liking it. So I am unexpected token in JSON position 3. JSON position 3. What does that mean? Let's see. Let me just copy this, and then we'll look it up in the browser. Let's say we've hit this error enough. Alright, let's see what's happening here. Problem with fetch boom up. Okay. That's fine. I think what happened is I didn't set up my yep. So right now I don't have a way of getting the data from the message. So I'm saying I'm going to send data one way, but when I send the JSON, my code has no idea what to do with it. So it's like, okay, you gave me a bunch of stuff, but what did you really do? I told Express that they can use this JSON data. So it says it's going to return me this JSON data, but I never did anything for my code to say, okay, when I get JSON data, I know how to parse it into an object. So I have to go in and do that. And the way I'm going to get that in is I'm going to do npm install, and I think it's -i, and I'm going to use something called body. Actually, before I install it, I'm going to go to npm body parser. And in here, you see it's a middleware. Parse incoming request bodies in the middleware before your handlers. So, and that's what lets us use that request.body. Because before when it said request.body, like, what the hell are you talking about? What is this? I have no idea what you're sending me. So now it's like, okay, we know what request.body is, and we'll see that working here. Body parser. I think I screwed up. Okay, let me take that dash out. Boom, there we go. Alright, that was successful. So now, cleared screen. I don't know how many times I gotta go. Oh, that's why. CLS. Boom. Now we have that. So now let's go back over to Postman and try this again. Still a bad request. Huh. So I think it's saying here there's a missing. So this token here is this tag for the I think it's this. I don't know what to call it, this string. So I'm just gonna go in here. Hopefully Control F works, and I want to replace all of these with I don't think it'll let me do it. Oh, can I? Nah, it's not gonna let me do it. Okay, so pretty much I wanted to change all of these single quotes into double quotes, and you see the text is different now, right? Yeah, I think that was the issue. There's definitely got to be a way I can replace all of these at once. This is too tedious. Come on, man, give me something. Okay, screw it. I just have to do it. So now we know, right? Definitely need those strings to be in this specific way. And I guess it's just because with JavaScript it knows, but it's like now we're talking about these JSON objects. These are not unique to well, this is the format. It's just that's just what it is. The parser just doesn't know how to interpret these single quotes. So that's where our problem is coming from. That's really all it is. And you see everything looks completely different now. So stuff is happening. So that's not a good thing with a lot of these tools. It's like, if my stuff doesn't highlight, there's probably something wrong. And while I'm at it, I'm just gonna Google how the date is supposed to go in JSON. How you're supposed to put that in there. Um, how to add date JavaScript date to JSON. So I should be able to create a JSON encode that looks like this. So I think I might have been fine putting that date in that string format that I had, because it comes out like this. So let me go ahead and try to go and use that same date that we used here and copy the value, and I'll put that there. And if it gives me an error, then at least we know why. And then down to the last few changes here, get that draft there, and then I'm gonna send that. Now we have our 201. So now it was successful, and you see what we get back. So now we see this object. And now the cool thing is we can look in the database. Let's refresh. Where's the refresh button? So sometimes it's a little funky. Yeah, jump all the way out of it. Collections, refresh, post, and now you see the second one is in here. So now we know this is different, and we know this is the one we use from the router because the field is that. So the first one was, hey, this is a test, and now we're like, hey, this is a test using a router, and it works. So it's not super complex to get this stuff in there. Once you understand the basics of what's doing what and how everything is linked together to communicate. And then what we can do is let's try to see what happens if we try to change the status. This should give us a 400 error because it should hit our validator that we had on our post model. It says, hey, if it's not draft, pending, or active, do not accept this. So, and we should actually see this error message. So let's try this again. And boom, 400. And then look at what we get here. We get status can only be draft, pending, or active. So now it's telling us exactly what's wrong and why it's wrong. So let's put pretty. I like pretty JSON. So now we're seeing exactly what's going on there. So now we have tons of information, so we know exactly why this thing failed. So that is beautiful. So now we have that going. Now another thing that we might want to do, we might want to get a post. We might want to say, hey, I posted something and now I want to receive it. So think about you, somebody writing a blog, creating it, and now you want to deliver it to a user. How are you going to get that to a user? So what you have to do is, actually, before I dig into that, I want to clean this up a bit. And what I'm really going to do is I want to make sure that when I create this post, it doesn't already exist because I don't want to duplicate. So maybe I click my save button twice and it's like, oh dude, you're saving and you're trying to save and you have two posts in here now because I clicked my button twice. I don't want to do that because now let's say something weird happens. I click it 3 or 4 times. Now every time I make a post or if I every time I do this, I have to go manually in and remove those duplicates. Or why waste time with that when I can just make sure it doesn't only one of those get in there and then you know, I don't have to worry about it. So that's always nice. So what I want to do is I want to say actually I think that might already be a thing in here. I'm sorry, I'm kind of looking at my old code to kind of jog my memory on some of this stuff, and it seems like I should be good to go with creating my post in the way that I'm doing it now. However, it can't hurt to validate. So I'm just gonna go in here and I'm just gonna click this button again, and this time I'm just gonna say draft, and I'm gonna send it again. Oh, server's not running. So now I'm gonna go in here and try this again. I'm gonna try this again and hit it. Boom, it takes it. So it's like what? Two posts of the same exact thing. And I think I actually can just refresh here. Um, Where's that refresh button? Oh, and I'll show you guys something cool while I'm here. We can actually look at this table in a lot of different formats. We can look at it like that, as the test text. We can. Oh, I think I just popped it out. I want to pop that back in. I think this is a cleaner format because now you can kind of just high level just look over it and see what's going on there. Um, Next thing is, so we have that, and you see this thing here, this find. It's already so right now it doesn't do anything, but this is kind of like a sorting option. So if I click on this one, let's see what happens. Actually, if we wanted um, to this is kind of what happens with mongoose. For mongoose, we just create these short little routers and we tell it what we're doing. But in MongoDB, you have to do a little bit more. So you have to kind of go into the collection and they say we want to go into this collection called post and we're going to look for something. So this is more like getting data. Um, but what if I did find, I think, one by ID or something? I could be a little off. But let's see, I copy the value and I put that in here. Oh, I don't want all that. And I try to run this. So this is actually a terminal as well. So we can put stuff in here and we can run it. But I'm not gonna play around with that because I'm not too familiar and I don't want to make myself look any slower than I already do. But what I do want to do is say, hey, I want to go in here and I want to say if this post already exists, I do not want to put it in here. So what I have to do is say so say first we create the post and then we'll say um so what I'm going to say if, and I'm kind of winging on this one here. I'm looking at my old code to try to see if there's any clues, but no guarantees. Okay, so here we go. I got it. So we're gonna try to say. So we're gonna do if post, and then we're gonna do dot find by ID. So we get this all from the Mongoose stuff, and I showed you that a little bit before in the documentation. They give us all the lookups that we need here, so querying. So if we want to make a query, we can go and say, hey, I want to find a post. So you can just go do find, and you can specify the data that you want. But instead of doing all that to get an exact match, you can just use that ID that we get for free, that it creates. We can say, hey, we're gonna find by ID, and the ID is unique, so you don't have to do anything else, and that's all we have to do. So we're gonna say find. I think it's find. Well, let me do this right. Go back to the docs, and it says find by ID. And what are the other options here? Now I'm curious. So find by ID. Yeah, so find by ID is only going to find one because there's only one ID if it's there. So we're going to say if post dot find by ID. We're going to say, actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it here and try. Say if post dot find by ID. So we might run into an error in here too. We'll say and it'll be post dot. Am I doing this right? Maybe not. Oh. Yeah. Okay. I see. I'm not sending the ID through here. Yes, I did. Oh, yes, I did. So I'm gonna say. So, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that this right here is the request, and this right here is the response. So, this gives us a request by object, and this is a response object. Kind of just dove right in there, forgot to explain that stuff. So right now, I don't want to be able to have duplicate stuff. So I need to tap into that ID, and I should be able to say const ID equals request dot params dot ID, and we're just picking out the ID from in here. So it might be, nope, I think I'm good so far. So and this is actually the ID like that. So it'll match the way it's written in the database, underscore ID. So then we can say, okay, we're gonna look up this ID. So we're gonna underscore ID. So if that's in there, we're gonna throw an error, and we're gonna say this post already exists, or we're gonna yell. So I'm gonna clear that up, and then we're gonna run the server again, and then we're gonna go to Postman, and we're gonna try this again, and hopefully it works. So I'm getting an error, but there's no body. So I'm trying to figure out, and it sent us to 400 as well. I thought the error would come with it. Let's see. Maybe I missed something. Console wait post. Okay. Let's do this. We'll say const existing post equals we're gonna wait because it's gonna take some time for it to do it. It's not gonna be immediate, so we gotta give it some time. So we're gonna say you're going to say if existing post, then throw an error. Otherwise, do what you do. And I'm seeing good stuff here. Let me see if there's a specific code that we can send. Actually, it doesn't matter. We're just gonna send an error. For right now. And then let's try that again. And I'm gonna stop this. Actually, let me look up NodeMon because I don't know why it's not working. And I don't want to keep writing this. npm NodeMon. So I have NodeMon installed, and did I not do that? So right here, I want to save it as a development dependency, and I don't know if I did that. So I'll just go in here, and I have NodeMon, and I'm gonna take this out because I don't want this to be a dependency for my whole project because I'm only ever going to do this in development mode. So what I really want to do is say npm install NodeMon dash save dash dev, and it's going to create in here scripts. I believe it should be a development dependency, so that'll be in its own section. npm dash dash. Oh, okay, I have the syntax a little backwards. So let me go here, and we'll go NodeMon. So now we have that going, and that should do it. So yeah, I was right. It should be npm actually NodeMon index.js, and it still refuses to install. Do I have to install it globally? I'm utterly confused. Did I not save that? Oh, so it updated. So now you see this new thing here, dev dependencies. That's what's happening. I'm just gonna close this. I'm not gonna save the changes because that's the problem. I had the file open while I was using it. So you see that now has dev dependencies. So these are dependencies that are only relevant for development mode. So that should bring it down. But there's also something else. And actually, let me just go ahead here, and I'll say there's also some kind of shortcut stuff in here that you can do. So what I want to do is say I'm going to create this dev shortcut, and I need a comma. Actually, I can take this test out. Only thing that does is for your code to say, hey, when you start up, you would run that test thing to make sure it works. I'm going to do, my test script is going to be NodeMon, and it's going to be index.js. So if that doesn't work, then I know there's something else going on, maybe with my configuration or something. So I think it should be node dev, I think. Shit. Node run dev. Alright, shield's not as sharp as I would like to be, but it's still cool. Automatic rerunning, config files. What am I missing? Let me try this. Let me just type NodeMon and see. NodeMon is not recognized. So Control Shift C and see what I'm doing wrong, because that is what the command is. Here we go. I think I needed to do a global install. Yep. There we go. So I need to install it globally. So I'm going to just delete that because apparently I don't need it right now. Save that file. And then we're going to do this thing all over again. And I think I need to do, I'll do -G here. npm install -G. I think that's what the docs had anyway. I think I skipped a line. Yeah, either through cloning with Git or using it the recommended way. So that's what I want here. I want it to be, I guess I can install it globally because it's not like it's unique to what I want to do, but I still want to have the rest of the stuff too. Save, dev, and then I want to do what was it? Oh yeah, nomon. So that should chain properly. So oh yeah, so you have to install it globally because it's not just related to this project. I need my computer to recognize nomon when I type in the terminal. And nomon index.js. And boom. There we go. You see that? And then watch this. Actually I'm gonna close this file. Actually I'm just gonna do something to break it. Oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll see it work. But just know that this is going to auto reload no matter what I do. I mean, when I make changes. Let's go in here. Getting that 400. Went through. Created. Go again. Oh, it's creating. So my plan did not work. I think it's because this error that I thought I had in here, it's not working. And let's see. Let me go to the docs for Mongoose. And I'm actually going to go to populate. No, I'm going to use. Saving reps. Actually, let me just go to documents, retrieving, updating, validating, overriding. When you load documents, find one. So I really just want to create one, and when I create it, I don't want it to be stuck. So let's say find documents. Oh, I think what happens. So when I create a document, I need it to give me an error. I thought that the error that I was creating was fine, but it seems like it's not. And the way I can test this is I'm gonna look back in here, close it, refresh the collection, and then click back on it, and you see we have all these objects in here that are matching. So honestly, I think let me go in here and change this to say find by ID, because I think what I did was I looked it up to say to look it up by the ID, but I think that's what's wrong because all these IDs are unique. So instead of looking it up by ID, I need to look up by title. And if the title is the same, then I know that it is this. I know I have the same one in there. So maybe this just helps me with looking up to make sure I don't create the same post with the same title. That makes more sense logically, but that might run into problems there too. But let's just say title. So we're just gonna say title equals request.params.title, and we're gonna do that. So now when I save it, you see that NodeMon automatically picked it up, so I don't have to keep stopping and running the server. So now when I try to go, we get that 400 error. My only problem is that I'm not getting my um, my error code, my error message. So I want to dig into this a little bit more, and let's just go to, I'll say I want to return. Let's, instead of throwing error, let's return an error and see what happens. I want to say that this return is going to kick me out of here and knock me into the next loop, but let's see. Nope. It's going to keep waiting forever because it returned out of one place, but it never moved into this next block here because it's trying to save it, and it's like, hey, you threw an error, so we can't save it. So I think what I need to do is I need to say, I need to do response dot status, and I want to look for a status that is so we're gonna send error message back. So I should be able to go in here and create that error. New error, yeah. Oop. And I don't even think I need new. I can just send this. And then for the status, let's look at those HTTP status codes and say, not modified, multiple choices, move permanently, found, see other, bad request, unauthorized, forbidden, not found, method not allowed, not acceptable, request timeout, conflict. That sounds okay. Let's see if there's another kind of response we want to send. Because really a 400 error just means like you made a bad request, like maybe there's some bad data in here. So let's see what should I do here. What kind of HTTP code for duplicate entries? Yep, thought so. So we're gonna send response dot status. So actually, and we're gonna return this, I believe. So we're gonna return, and this gets us out of where we are. So we're gonna jump over this. Instead of sending that, we're gonna send this, and then we're gonna jump out of there. So we're gonna turn a 409. And for some reason, I don't think I've ever did that in any of my previous stuff. Nope. Let me check somewhere else. Because, and you want these error messages to be helpful in terms of for when you're sending these errors to your user. I mean, they won't be able to interpret it, but you might have some handling to say, see, look at that conflict, boom. And then this object is still returning blank. Let me see if I change the type. I really want to see this error. I don't know why it's not letting me send it. Yep, there we go. Boom, this post already exists. So that's some handling we can do. So before we were able to keep creating those, you can just drop it collection, and it just removes it completely, so it disappears. But it's okay because when I do this again, it'll go, and then when I try to do it again, we get that. So that's what we want. And you know, especially for me, I want to say, hey, I got this thing. And then I'll go over some authentication stuff later, but I don't want to get into that right now. So as you can see, we just made a whole lot of progress. Um, we went from taking this model, defining it, and now we're able to take that, using that model, we're able to create um, a post that we can actually put in our database, and we can now create a post. The next thing that we want to do is you might want to look at one. So you want to say, hey, router.get. So you're going to go get that post. So we got to do something like this. And there's a special kind of thing that you do here. So this thing is going to say ID, because we're going to get the post by ID now. And what it's like, whatever the ID is for that post, for this particular post that we're looking at, and I keep writing this wrong. Actually, it's a sync, and we're gonna do request, response, and we're gonna go boom, boom, and we're gonna go here. So I'm gonna say const, and this time I'm actually looking at my old code again, because what happens here is now that you have a post object in your database, you can look it up by its ID. So maybe not in this case because I don't know what the ID is here, but let's say when I create it, I go in the database, I grab the ID. Oh, let me refresh, and you'll see that there's only one in here. So no matter how many times I click this thing, we got that. So now that that's cool, we know that when I get the ID, I'll say, hey, I'm gonna grab. So now I can grab the ID. So I'm gonna copy that value, and I'm gonna create a new type of request. And this time I want it to be get post. And then save it there. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna do local host 3000, and this time I'm gonna do my slash. I'm gonna do post slash, and the ID is that. So now, right now when I do it, there's nothing there because this isn't configured. So it has no idea what to do. So what we have to do is we have to say, so first I'm gonna say the const ID, because now now we're looking up this ID. So we have to define what the ID is, and it's just gonna be the request dot parameters dot ID. So now we're tapping into the parameters of this HTTP request, and it's the same kind of thing. It's the body has all of, when you're sending that kind of stuff, but this time we're doing request parameters, and this is kind of how we snatch the ID off from the parameters. So we're gonna try to find this post. So we're gonna say const post equals, in this case I did do await. So now we're gonna say, hey, we're gonna go to our database. We're gonna say, in this case we're looking at the post collection. We're gonna say post dot find by ID, and the ID is going to be the ID that we just pulled off the body. I mean it's the ID that we pulled from the request parameters up in the URI. So now if I go, if there's no user, well, if there's no post, I'm sorry, I'm reading the user stuff. If there's no post, then we're gonna send a 400 response status, a 404 actually, as you saw here. When it couldn't find it, it sent us a 404 to say, hey, I can't find that. So now we're gonna say, okay, it's not found, and we're gonna send nothing because it's already explicit there. We're not gonna give you anything because we can't find it. So now here, if it does exist, we're gonna send you that post. So you'll get that post data in your JSON. So now we're going to catch any errors, and we'll go here and we'll say we'll send a 500 status, because at this point it's like, hey, um, it exists, but for some reason our server is having a problem giving that to you. So if we go down in here, look at the 500 error, you see it's like the server encountered an unexpected condition that prevented it from fulfilling the request. So if it exists, we should give you the post. If it doesn't, you should get that 404. If any other error happens, then the server is having some kind of problem, and that's why you didn't get it. And maybe this E here will give you it. So that is all you need for that. So when I jump out of that and I save this, and this should actually work now because it exists in the database. So look at that. We get back that testing this post that we created earlier. So you see the description. This is a test using a router, and then we go over here to the database. This is a test using a router. So we got it. So that's all we had to do to look it up and get it back. So now the next thing you might want to do is, hey, you got it. You're looking at it like, oh, maybe like saying for the in the case of a blog post or something, maybe there's an error. Maybe you have a typo, or maybe you put the wrong picture in there, or maybe you gave it the wrong title. So now you're gonna say, okay, now we're gonna go ahead and patch some stuff up. So we're gonna make some changes. So now we're gonna go post, and we're actually gonna do the same kind of thing, but we're actually gonna do the same exact thing we did here for the get, and we're gonna do the same thing we did here for the get, except here we're gonna async await response, and we're going to do the same thing. We're gonna get this ID. Actually, let me see what I've got going on over here. So now that we're patching, it seems like there's a very specific method that we have here in Mongoose. So when you go into Mongoose, let's look at querying, and actually let me click over here, queries. So we want to update something, and when you look at updating, there's this update 1, but it doesn't tell you anything about finding it. So you look here, options, and if true, delete any properties. Yeah, so this isn't what we're looking for. But when we go back queries and we say, because first we have to retrieve it, right? We have to retrieve it from the database, then we have to update. So we can do find by ID and update, or find one and update. In this case, since IDs are more specific, we can use that. And what this will do is this will, let's see, issues a MongoDB find and modify update command. So what happens here is we're going to use that ID field to look it up. And it's equivalent to find one and update, except when you do find one, you have to specify what conditions you're looking for. In this case, we have a very specific identifier, ID, so there's no point in trying to match it to a specific object unless you're looking for something else. So we're going to use that. So now we're going to jump right into our try catch, and we can do the same thing we did above and define the ID and do that. Like for instance here, we don't even have to use this variable ID. We could literally go in here and just grab it and put it there and have the same kind of thing. And I just kind of like doing it this way because if I want to change something, I can just grab it here and change it. Granted, there's only one instance of it, but that's just kind of something, a habit for doing it. Now, actually, for consistency, I'll go ahead and take this and put this down in here. Boom. So now we've got that. And then when I go over here, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say try. We're going to try to do this. Say const post equals await. So now we're going to wait for the database to see if we can find this thing. So we're going to look on the database and say, hey, see if you can find this post dot find by ID and update. And then we're going to give it request dot params dot ID. So now that ID is what it's looking for. And then there's some options on this thing. And when we go back to the the code here, I mean to the docs here, there's some options. So it takes an ID and it takes an update. Actually, this update is required. So when you look over here, it's saying we're gonna update it. What are you gonna update it with? So that's what that's telling you here. So it's saying it's an object. So what are we updating this with, right? So finds a matching document. So see here, update. Finds a matching document by that ID that we put in there, updates it according to the update arg that we're gonna give it here, and then if any options that we give it, it returns the found document, if any. So if we look at the options, we have new equals false. So we can do all this stuff. We say by default, returns the document as it was before. Update was applied. So what that means is we don't want. So it's saying, do we want the original object before we updated it? So that's what we'll get. So we'll get the old data back, or do you want to get the new data, which is the new post that you created? And obviously we want the new one because we already know what we changed, so we want to see that. So so there we go there. And then lean, if true, the mongoose will return the document as a plain JavaScript object rather than a mongoose. So we don't want that. Oop. Session null, the session associated with this query, we're okay with that. I don't need that. So we don't want to manipulate that. Omit undefined. If true, delete any properties whose value is undefined when casting an update. And other, excuse me. In other words, if this is set, mongoose will delete Baz from the update in model.update1, this empty object here, foo bar Baz, because it's undefined. So it's not going to send that. It's just going to ignore it. So that way, if let's say you make a mistake when you're updating something, or you refer to some data that doesn't exist, it'll just ignore it as opposed to give you an error. You have some timestamps that you can have in there. So if you don't want to change your timestamp, you're fine in your schema. You can return the original. So I think we kind of already have something like that up at top, and then overwrite. So by default, if you don't include update operators in update, mongoose will wrap update in set for you. This prevents you from accidentally overwriting the document. This option tells mongoose to skip adding set. An alternative to this would be using mono.find1 and replace. So in this case, you'll be replacing it as opposed to just updating what you already have. So we're going to pass in our update in the body. So we'll do request dot body. And then we do want to do a few things. We want to say new is true. So when we do that, as you've seen here, we're going to get that new document. So that's what we want. And then the other one is, I don't see it here, but there's an option to run validators, and I think that might be a MongoDB kind of thing. Let me see. Run validators. There we go. So these are additional options in that set, I believe. So when you run validators, it just runs the validators again to make sure that whatever you input into your post is still valid. Make sure your post is still valid no matter what you change. So for instance, let's say we updated the status and we didn't validate. Now we have a status in here that could potentially not fit what we have here, and that can throw off everything that we've worked hard to try to keep our database up to code, right? So we're gonna run validators just to make sure that it still is in alignment with our policies. So now we're gonna say if there isn't a post, then we need to give it a 400 to say we didn't find it, so there's nothing here. So we're gonna say response dot status. We're gonna send that 404, and then we're going to send that out to the user. Now, if there is a post, we want to say we want to give that to the user. So, forgot to put the return there. And then otherwise, we're going to return. No, actually, I don't need to return. So return just keeps me from jumping into the next block. So here in the response dot status, and in this case it'll be we're updating. So I think that's a 204. I want to say. Let's double check here. Instead of 300. Oh, actually, we're just gonna send the data back, so we're not sending any status code here. I feel like that's incorrect. Let's see if there's a HTTP response for that. HTTP response for updating. 204 should imply resource updated successfully. Okay, so for a pull request, so we can either do a 200 or 204, which means no content. No content is a little, different. So I guess we can just do okay to say, okay, if you get that okay, then you know that your post was updated successfully. So then it will send that out. And then otherwise we'll catch any errors that come out. And with that, we're going to say, okay, we couldn't find it. We couldn't find it. It's not that we couldn't find it, and it's not that it exists, but there's something else going on in here. So we're going to give you a 500 to say, actually not a 500, a 400 to identify that there was a bad request. So maybe your update was invalid, right? So maybe you tried to send something in and it wasn't right. So that's what this does here, because we're not fetching data, we're trying to modify it. So that's what's happening here, because it can be in a case where it's not that. So let's say it does exist, but it fails the validation. So now we send that error back, and we'll see that in a second. So we'll do send the error. So we're going to save this, and now we're going to create another request. We say update post. And now I'm going to take that same ID that I had previously. Actually, let me close this old stuff out. Let me save this stuff. I don't want to save it here. I'm not going to save it. So this one I can save. This one I can save. So it updated it. So now, in order to do that, let's do this. We're going to grab all that. And we have this here. So now, what we have to modify, what we have to take note of is we're not going to be deleting this. We're going to keep this, the same post with the same ID, but we just want to change one thing on it. So let's say instead of this cover image that we have there, we just want to change that. So what we'll do is, let me change this to a post. I believe it's supposed to be, no, not a post, a patch. And what we're going to do is click the body and click raw JSON. And in the body, I'm going to say I want to change the image. I think that's the tag for it, right? Cover image. So cover image, and we're going to change that to say some image. And keep doing that. So we need some image. So when I send that off, we get to 200. And you see here the cover image says some image. So here previously it said this. Now when we refresh the table, so I'm going to hide that, and then I'm going to refresh the collection. And now you see, I don't know why this thing makes me do this. Now you see it says some image. And we didn't create a new one. We still have the same existing thing. So that's the beauty in that. And I thought this underscore V would have changed, but maybe it's relying on something else. So that's what that does there. And I'll go ahead and wrap this one up here because I'm approaching that 2-hour mark. And tomorrow we'll dive more into deleting these kinds of this data, deleting posts, because maybe it's just a bad post. Maybe you want to maybe you run out of space and you want to change your what you got going on in your posts. Or maybe you you save a post by mistake, you didn't want it there and you want to remove it. So that's what that'll do. So that is what I'll be working on tomorrow. And thank you for tuning in, and see you guys tomorrow.